Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, August 14th, time for the AM edition of C2-A-Days. And of course, we've been away since Friday afternoon, so there are quite a few notes to try to get through in our AM edition here. And I got to be honest, I've got dozens of tabs still open, trying to go through all the news and notes from the weekend, which was packed with quite a few scrimmages. Seemed like just about every FBS team had a scrimmage of some sort over the weekend. So there will be plenty of information for us to discuss this afternoon as well. But for now, I did want to make a quick note as we prepare for today's rundown. Uh, when there are scrimmages, there are a wide range of setups. This is much like a spring game where sometimes it's the number one offense versus the number one defense. Sometimes it's the number ones versus the number twos. Sometimes they hold players out with a small injury, or just want to get young guys more reps, want to protect the older, more veteran players. Some scrimmages are open to the public or the media. Some are closed and offer just very limited reports, or we just have to uh, try to parse what we can from maybe a press conference after the fact, a day or two later. So with anything we discuss here, one, we're relying on a wide range of great reporters from newspaper sources, TV, radio, team specific sites, places like On3, 247, Rivals, all kinds of hardworking folks out there doing what they can to provide the most up to date and useful information possible. But sometimes those people are not able to give as much as they want, and we certainly have to understand that. Also, I think I mentioned this on Friday as well. If you see a particular stat, so and so went 15 of 16 for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, keep in mind, who was that against? Who was held out on the defensive side of the ball? It's just important not to read too much into any one particular thing. But with that in mind, we will get started with C2-A-Days, the Monday AM edition, August 14th, from campus to Canton.com. Of course, we will start at Alabama, where all eyes are on the quarterback situation there. There were quotes from head coach Nick Saban, as brought to us from Charlie Potter of Bama Online, the On3 site. Says, look, everybody got reps today at quarterback. I'm not a stats guy, so we're not interested in what their statistics were. We are going to be interested when we watch the film in how did they execute? Did they throw the ball to the right place at the right time? Were they accurate in what they did? Did they take care of the ball so that we have a chance to play winning football at that position? John Talty of Bama 247 offered a little more detail, and also gave some insight to where his thinking is currently on the battle there. I believe I've mentioned before that if you, of course, haven't seen our FBS team profiles in the C2C winning edge tier, certainly suggest you take a look. Would absolutely love to have your support there. But mentioned that Tyler Buckner, the incoming transfer from Notre Dame, had been sort of penciled in as the starter in my depth chart projections, and I certainly look to some other sources as well for help with that. But I specifically haven't had a real strong opinion. If I were to have said my thoughts going into Saturday's scrimmage, I would have thought Buckner 34%, Milroe 33%, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson 33%. But it seems, according to Talty, perhaps, and I know there's some other folks, including a lot of smart people in our campus to Canton CFF team, who think that Jalen Milroe is the guy to beat, and Talty seems to be in that camp as well. He wrote up, mentioned Jalen Milroe looked the best of the three main contenders for the starting quarterback position. Milton had 3 touchdowns on the day, 2 passing and 1 rushing, including a nice long touchdown pass to Jermaine Burton. Tulty was also complimentary of Burton and how well he played. Ty Simpson had a solid but unspectacular scrimmage performance, according to Talty's sources. Simpson started a bit slow, but then was able to come on late. Tyler Buckner apparently struggled, throwing an interception into triple coverage at one point. So in a follow-up piece, Talty did 3 things I think, 3 things I know, and one of the things was that he thinks that Jalen Milroe is the guy to beat now. Sorry, Talty mentioned that he believes that the quarterback race is down to Milroe and Ty Simpson, that Buckner is a great insurance policy, but is fading as a primary contender for that job. With that insight and the fact that Milroe seems to be getting the most positive reports, I did go ahead, make the change in our projected starters in our Alabama QB depth chart. That doesn't really impact our power ratings or rankings very much. Milroe and Buckner are rated very, very similarly the way that we calculate things on an individual basis. And so that's not going to impact the greater team as a whole. But of course, we certainly want to make note when there is a reason to make a change. We try to do that as quickly as possible. So there have been a lot of adjustments made to our team profile projected depth charts based on some of these reports that we'll get to a little later on today as well. At Auburn, Ainsley Lee of AL.com mentioned the post-scrimmage note from head coach Hugh Freeze, the quote that seems to be getting the variety of headlines. Yesterday, I had my mind made up, Freeze said, after a Saturday scrimmage. Said, and after today, I need to watch the film before I can say. So trying to read between the lines, speculate. We've mentioned Peyton Thorne, the transfer from Michigan State, has gotten the majority of first-team reps from what we have seen. But that makes you think that leading into the scrimmage, perhaps Thorne had a lead, but maybe based on how things shook out on the field, perhaps somebody else has stepped up and made a real case. Robbie Ashford has been primarily with the 2s and 3s. Holden Grenier has been a factor as well. Freeze mentioned in the press conference that both of those players threw touchdown passes on Saturday. Thorne did not, but had 2 passes that were apparently very, very close to being touchdowns that were just ruled out of bounds, but caught out of bounds. So another quote from Freeze, according to Lee, they all, talking about the quarterbacks, they did not turn the ball over. That's priority number 1 in offensive football, so that was good. But not surprisingly, at both Auburn and Alabama, we're not necessarily getting any real clear distinction as to who's going to take that first snap in week 1. Nathan King of Auburn Undercover made note, gave quite a few details on some of the injuries that are impacting the receiver position, which of course could have an impact on the quarterback competition as well. King noted that Javarius Johnson and Camden Brown were both held out of the scrimmage on Saturday. Brown apparently has been dealing with what Freeze called a string of bad luck in terms of injuries since the spring. And King mentioned that Brown said on Friday he's been dealing with a hamstring issue, also had an ankle issue in the spring. At Georgia, Carson Beck has been the clear leader, according to basically all accounts, heading into fall camp. Mike Griffith of Dog Nation mentioned that though Beck continues to lead, Kirby Smart, the head coach, has made it clear that both Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift remain under consideration. There was a quote here from Kirby Smart, who wasn't very complimentary of quarterback play in Saturday scrimmage. He says, according to Griffin, I don't think any of those quarterbacks would tell you they played their best game. And I think we need each one of them to get better to get where we want to go. There were, of course, some other injuries, some other notes, mostly on an injury standpoint to notice. Rylan Wilson, a true freshman linebacker, apparently was involved in a scary play that could potentially limit his ability to play this fall. Kirby Smart said that after the scrimmage, Georgia did not expect that Wilson suffered any ligament damage, but it was like a knee hyperextension reportedly, and that could certainly sideline him for a little bit. Georgia's been dealing with injuries at multiple positions. We've talked about the running back group. We've talked about other linebackers, really all three levels of the defense. So the season perhaps can't start soon enough for Georgia, as they seem to be dealing with a lot of nicks and bruises over the course of the early days of fall camp. At South Carolina, following up some items that we mentioned late last week, Michael Lanana of the State reported that Antoine Wells did not participate in the scrimmage on Saturday with what he described as a lower body injury. And head coach Shane Beamer had some follow-up as well. It sounded a little murky when we discussed it on Friday. As to what was holding Wells out, but now, I specifically have now seen a report about the low body injury. And then, of course, Beamer offered more context, said that Juice Wells didn't scrimmage today. He won't be back next week, but optimistic he'll be ready for game one. Knowing how Juice attacks things, he's got a little bit of a lower body injury he's dealing with right now. Nothing long-term, just some things that he's got to get a hold of. He assures me he's playing game one. Knowing him, he will. So positive potentially that Wells expects to play week one. Me personally, a guy who as head coach says, won't be practicing the third week in August. I'm a little bit skeptical, quite honestly, that he'll be able to at least play at close to 100%. So we'll certainly have to keep an eye on how things are going for Juice Wells. Emily Adams of Gainesville News said that in Wells's absence, five-star true freshman Nicholas Harbor and sophomore Omega Blake have made the strongest impression with first-team reps. And then we mentioned that Trey Knox had been away from practice on Friday. He also did not participate in the scrimmage on Saturday, according to Lanana. But Beamer said that Knox is expected to return on Monday. So that perhaps a little bit more positive news than Wells. But of course, we will find out more as we get a little closer to week one. At LSU, Wilson Alexander of The Advocate made a mention that Mason Smith, the defensive lineman, went down in an 11-11 drill late in practice. Smith is an All-American caliber defensive lineman who missed almost the entirety of the 2022 season after suffering an injury in week one against Florida State. He did not return to the field, apparently, after the injury, but did walk off with a slight limp. Just something to monitor there. LSU certainly played last year without Smith, but it's certainly worth mentioning, worth monitoring his health situation as impactful of a defensive lineman as he could potentially be. Alexander also mentioned that wide receiver Chris Hilton, who caught multiple 40-yard touchdowns, was one of the top performers of the day for LSU. At Iowa, Scott Docterman of The Athletic was all over the news from Saturday's open scrimmage in Iowa City, where Caden McNamara scrambled and fell awkwardly with what appeared to be a right knee tweak, according to Docterman. It was a non-contact situation, which is always a little bit of a scary word for us to see, certainly in relation to a knee injury. McNamara removed himself from action a few minutes later and spent about an hour away from the field, reportedly with the training staff. Head coach Kurt Ferentz was quoted afterward by doctormen saying, "I'm not alarmed right now. It's not like, oh boy, he broke his leg or something like that." That would be really significant. So I think it's going to be one of those things. We just have to take it day by day, and hopefully it's on a shorter end rather than a longer end. McNamara dealt with some injuries last year, had a right knee injury that ended his season and resulted in surgery when he was at Michigan. It also limited him in the spring. So perhaps we will learn something very, very soon as to the severity of McNamara. But of course, his transfer coming in from Michigan is one of the biggest reasons for optimism that the Hawkeyes will be able to take a step forward offensively in 2023. According to Doctorman, Deacon Hill has established himself as the number 2 quarterback. Should this limit McNamara entering the season, it seems like Hill is probably expected to be the next man up. At Miami, Adam Lichtenstein of the Sun Sentinel had a very positive note on freshman running back Mark Fletcher and his performance Saturday at the Hurricane scrimmage. He apparently broke off a long touchdown run, had multiple impressive runs, all with the first team offense. However, Lichtenstein did note that Henry Parrish Jr. was the starter at running back in the scrimmage. So doesn't necessarily sound like Fletcher is in line to be the top ball carrier, but does sound like he is in line to make an impact as a true freshman. A.J. Allen, who transferred to Miami from Nebraska, quote, probably topped 100 yards, according to Susan Miller Dingen of the Miami Herald. And he also had a 50-yard run in the scrimmage. So Miami has certainly, it seems, built some depth at that running back position. There was a long list of players who did not participate in the scrimmage, according to reports. That included players like Trevonte Citizen, who is coming back from injury, Zion Nelson, the offensive lineman who we've mentioned before, defensive lineman Akeem Mesidor, who is one of the best players defensively for Miami. And then Elijah Arroyo, who is working his way back from injury, the tight end, but did not participate in the scrimmage. As a result, Cam McCormick has started at tight end. And McCormick, I think, is according to reports, been getting a lot of first-team reps, though Arroyo, most expect, would certainly be either a starter or in the mix very much with the first team when he is back and fully healthy. At Notre Dame, Pat Sampson of The Athletic noted that, of course, the Fighting Irish are one of those teams who are playing in week 0. So the scrimmage that Notre Dame had on Saturday marked the official end of preseason camp. So as Notre Dame gets ready to play Navy, they're now focused a little bit more on game prep. Notre Dame is, of course, a week ahead of most teams that we discuss, but you would expect that most everyone else this time next week will be, putting an end to their preseason camp talk and moving on to game prep. So we'll have to see how that impacts, what sort of news we're able to gather. It's very possible that, access is limited, at least in some places. Some unfortunate notes from the Notre Dame scrimmage on Saturday. Tight end Kevin Bauman tore his ACL. It's the second year in a row that he has had an ACL tear. And then a backup defensive lineman, Aiden Gobara, also suffered a torn ACL. Unfortunately, at Texas A&M, Donovan Green, who was expected to start at tight end, also suffered an HCL injury, according to Carter Corrales of Gig'em 247. Some other players who were dealing with some injuries coming into Saturday's scrimmage, 2 that we've mentioned before, safety Damari Richardson, right tackle Ruben Fathery, were both back it sounds like. However, running back Reuben Owens, one of the top true freshman running backs in the country, was a limited participant. So not always sure what that means, but perhaps just a little bit of something bothering him enough to, not let it go full go during the scrimmage. At Texas, Anwar Richardson of Orange Bloods reported that Jordan Whittington left Saturday's scrimmage with an upper body injury, potentially a shoulder injury. Xavier Worthy was held out. He had been dealing with a reported injury sometime last week, but sounds like there's a little bit of a illness situation going around the Texas locker room with Worthy out, with Whittington limited. Isaiah Nair, Casey Kane, and Jonte Cook received the first team reps, according to a tweet from Richardson. The Horns 247 staff noted that Whittington was really off to a great start in the scrimmage before he was injured. There were also some excited notes about Arch Manning, who had a 55-yard TD run in the scrimmage. Manning worked primarily with the threes and a little bit with the twos, according to the staff at Horns 247. And then there was a note about Jonathan Brooks in this write-up from the staff at Horns 247 that Brooks had the best overall day, but C.J. Baxter had his moments, including explosive play. And on a similar note, Justin Wells of Inside Texas, the On3 site, said that Jonathan Brooks looks fantastic, decisive. Cedric Baxter took one carry, 30-plus yards around the right edge, and then scored on a goal line play during the second session. Keelan Robinson added a 50-yard touchdown run on a 4th-and-1 play. So lots of positive notes there at the running back position at Texas, even with the wide receivers dealing with a little bit of uncertainty right now. And it sounds like perhaps Whittington's injury is something that could impact his preparation for the season, but I'm sure we'll learn some more details between now and then. At Stanford, Jackson Moore of Stanford 247 and a host of sites out on the West Coast who we've mentioned plenty already, had some perhaps under the radar notes. Apparently last week, Justin Lamson took the vast majority of first-team reps at quarterback during media viewing periods. Lamson is this transfer from Syracuse who was, off to a huge start to the spring in 2022, but then suffered an injury and did not play. Then he mentioned that Tuesday and Thursday of last week, Justin Lamson saw virtually every first-team rep in the viewable portions of practice. A lot of comfortability in the pocket, gets out really quickly, buying some extra time. So if you know anything about the history of Troy Taylor, the new head coach at Stanford, and what he did at Sacramento State, there is a lot of potential for the the quarterback to be a very productive runner. It sounds like Lamson is, perhaps able to, do some very good things there. Ashton Daniels, it seems, is taking most of the second team reps, with Ari Patu rotating in as well. One interesting tidbit that Moore mentioned, EJ Smith spent both the Tuesday and Thursday media viewing periods going through drills with the wide receivers rather than the running back, something to note there for sure. And then true freshman wide receiver Tiger Bachmeier apparently is impressing quite a bit still through fall practice. Moore drops a note that the receivers are being taught every position, and that Bachmeier is practicing primarily in the slot, but has also made an impact on the outside positions as well. All right, a few quick notes to finish here. At Arizona State, Drew Pine, who is reportedly taking first-team reps at quarterback on Friday, according to Jake Seymour of Sun Devil Source, suffered a hamstring injury in the scrimmage that could sideline him. Safety Montana Warren, a true freshman who had gotten quite a few reps with the first-team defense, reportedly, suffered a shoulder injury and is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, according to Denny. Brad Denny of 3TV CBS 5. And at Nebraska, wide receiver Xavier Betts is no longer with the team. Matt Rule mentioned on Saturday, and Mitch Sherman of The Athletic tweeted that out. Antonio Morales of The Athletic had quite a few quotes from players who were very, very impressed with freshman linebacker Tackett Curtis, who has been apparently one of the most impressive players in fall camp for the Trojans and has taken advantage of some injuries in the linebacker core early in fall camp to make a lot of plays. I know Caleb Williams specifically called Tackett Curtis a destroyer in a fairly long quote there. At Penn State, Johnny McGonigal of Patriot News and Penn Live opened a piece by saying Keandre Lambert-Smith separated himself in Penn State's wide receiver room during spring camp. He and Harrison Wallace III figured to be the top two targets, but this piece was titled Penn State wide receiver Caden Saunders standing out in training camp. So it sounds like Saunders is definitely moving in the right direction. At Louisville, Alexis Cubbett of the Courier-Journal noted that safety MJ Griffin will probably be out for the year with a lower leg injury, according to head coach Jeff Brom. That would be an unfortunate loss. Griffin was a starter last year for the Cardinals. At Tennessee, Patrick Brown of GoVols 247 mentioned that the wide receiver group was back at its full complement on Sunday. Brew McCoy was a starter, of course. Jacob Warren at tight end. Squirrel White and Dante Thornton were both working in the slot. Apparently White taking those first team reps, and then Ramel Caton was at the other outside spot as the starter alongside or opposite Brew McCoy. There are some defensive players dealing with a little bit of injury concerns. Tyler Barron is apparently working with trainers, according to Patrick Brown of GoVols 247. And defensive backs Wesley Walker and Tamarian McDonald have been limited for much of fall camp as well. At Virginia, Kobe Pace reportedly did not participate in the scrimmage on Saturday. He was spotted in Jackie Fulcini, by French Shuley, my apologies, in street clothes. It's unclear whether or not he was held out for anything injury related, and Mike Hollins took the reps with the top unit at running back. At Utah, Josh Furlong of KSL reported that Brandon Rose took a hit in the team scrimmage on Friday night and was seriously injured. At Utah State, Jason Turner of the Herald-Journal noted that Terrell Vaughn called him arguably the best receiver in the Mountain West. He looked the part in the scrimmage on Saturday, had over 100 receiving yards, and quite a few other wide receivers had a strong performance as well. There was a 35-yard catch by Micah Davis, the transfer from Air Force. Stanford transfer Colby Bowman had a long touchdown as well. Quarterback Cooper Lega had a quote, said, "I don't know if we have a DT like Devin Tompkins, the incredibly productive receiver for the Aggies a couple of years ago. But overall depth in the receiver room is the best we've ever had at Utah State that I've seen. There's so many guys who can go out there and make plays, and it's awesome for me. I think it's going to be hard for coaches, though, to see who they want to put out there when the time comes." And then finally, there was a note from Chris Carlson at Syracuse.com mentioning that LaQuint Allen, the running back, is back in camp, missed the first 2 weeks of training camp due to a summer school semester suspension. This has been mentioned, plenty of places previously. There was a little bit of concern whether or not Allen would actually even be eligible this fall. He is back, and after missing a couple of weeks, practicing again with the Orange. So that will do it for this edition. We will be back this evening, getting ahead of myself, August 14th. For the PM edition, plenty of other scrimmage notes to report, or excuse me, to follow up on others who are, of course, doing this reporting, which we very, very much appreciate. So do check us out at campus2canton.com. The C2 Winning Edge tier gets you access to our team profiles, where we do make adjustments based on these notes and many, many more, injury updates, other projections as well. Hope everyone has a wonderful Monday, and we will see you again this evening for the PM edition of C2 Days from Campus to Canton.